Hello and welcome to the first episode in our career series. So today we're going to be speaking with Adnan Raja. Adnan is a childhood friend of mine and is now an analyst at JP Morgan Investment Bank. I think his insights into the world of finance are quite useful and very interesting. Hopefully this video helps those who are looking to forge a career in finance in the city. Please like, comment, subscribe and share this video. And without further ado, let's jump into it. So why don't you start off by giving us a brief introduction of yourself?
Hello Haseeb, thanks for having me on. So I've come on today to essentially share my academic and professional background. I think I could have really done with actual insights into the world of finance when I was younger, and hopefully this podcast helps out those who are considering a career at an investment bank or in the corporate environment in general. So my name's Adnan Raja. I was born and raised in Blackburn, northwest of England, and after studying my ALevels, I moved to London to pursue a BSc in government at the London School of Economics.
So before we speak of your time at university, I just want to ask, which A-levels did you pick and why?
So I picked A-levels in maths, economics, politics, and in my second year I also did an extended project. And I really wanted two things from college. Firstly, as it was the first time I'd studied politics and economics, I wanted a concrete understanding of these two subjects. And secondly, because I had the aspiration of going to a world-class university, I knew that I needed a fantastic set of A-level grades because that was what was needed. So those were essentially my two guiding principles. So I was constantly asking myself, am I enjoying economics? Am I enjoying politics? Are these subjects going to keep my doors open? And finally, can I do well in these subjects? Those were my questions, and they helped to keep me in check and make sure that I was on the right path. And as for maths, well, I treated that differently because I see maths as more of a fundamental skill that I needed to carry on developing until I reached a certain level of competency. And I think everyone in the modern world needs to be able to do maths to a certain level. So as for my reasons for picking politics and economics, well, I picked them simply because they were subjects that I had the most interest in. And I guess sort of going back a bit, this stems from, a lot of further reading I did. So for example, I read a book called The Primacy of Politics by Sherry Berman, which really charts the history of how the communist left developed until what we have now, which is like modern social democracy, and really how the role that the state plays in people's lives and how, the intersection between politics and economics. And this book really ignited my interest in these two disciplines combined, as opposed to sort of distinct interests. And so I think, how the two interact and intersect each other was something that was sort of my interest in, that was born out of further readings as the one I've just cited. And then I sort of wanted to better understand the mechanics and philosophies of modern day politics, which is why I wanted to choose those A-levels and then subsequently at degree level.
Yeah, thanks for that. You mentioned The Primacy of Politics by Sherry Berman. That's a book which I've read, and I would definitely implore all students who are interested in the history of modern day politics to read. I think she does a really good job of, detailing why social democracy has become so popular in the Western world. But anyway, continuing with the theme of A-levels, how did you find your time at sixth form?
So my 2 years at sixth form contrasted drastically. In my first year of A-levels, I really struggled with maths, but the other two subjects I was at ease a bit more with. I actually reluctantly chose maths at A-level I finished my GCSE maths exam thinking, oh, thankfully I don't have to ever study maths again. But I soon realized the importance of the subject and how actually it's going to be a skill that I'm going to keep on drawing upon later on in life and the rest of my academic career. So between year 11 and 12, I sort of actually realized, oh no, I actually have to study maths. So I wasn't mentally prepared, and so then I didn't really enjoy it. But the thing with maths is the only way to get better at it is just through rote practice. So I realized this, pretty much early on in my first year, and thankfully it was a guiding principle that my teachers instilled in me. And so I just began doing so many past papers as I could, especially with individual topics. So when I was taught an individual topic, I'd find all the past papers related to that element of maths, and then I'd practice, get the hang of the subject, and then I'd be much more comfortable with doing questions. And one piece of advice I would give to current maths A-level students is to make a list of all the past papers as far back as they go, and then sit these past papers under exam conditions. And then, making sure you ask your teachers for help with any questions you really struggle with, and do that as early on as possible. Nip the issues in the bud. You don't want to be getting to like March, April time, and stuff that you did in September and October is still an issue. Really, you want those topics you did in September and October to be your easiest topics because you've had so much time practicing them and you're just so comfortable with it. And so, yeah, like I said, don't go more than a couple of weeks struggling with the same topics. Your teachers are fundamentally there to help. They have a vested interest in your success. And so, don't be afraid to ask them questions. I used to email teachers questions and topics frequently if I was struggling with it, and because it was more convenient for me and for them to get questions, as opposed to at the end of a lesson, they've got students coming in to teach the next lesson. I can't really go up to them at the end of the lesson and say, right, can you help me with this? So, for example, on a Saturday, if I did a past paper, I was doing my homework and I struggled with the question, I'd email them and say, okay, this is my working out. This is where I've got stuck. I'd literally take a picture of my paper and say, okay, where have I gotten wrong, or what's next? And they'd normally respond fairly quickly because for them it's fairly easy. So I guess that's sort of one way you could do it. Contrast that to politics, which became a bit more frustrating because the essay style was changing a bit. And so I found it hard to get the top grades. So I had to sort of learn how to adjust my writing style and applying, my knowledge. Like I was pretty confident because of the studying I did. My knowledge was like unbeatable, but you can have the knowledge in essay-based subjects and still not get the top grades because you've not written in the correct format, or you fall into a trap that many students do, which is you're just trying to regurgitate all the knowledge you have, and you're basically showing the examiner, oh, look how smart I am, I know all of these facts. That's not really useful because you've been asked a question, you need to answer that question. And I think learning how to write for different questions, actually reading the question and just like being as precise and clear as possible, and then your knowledge naturally comes out. But again, this is something that only comes natural once you've done so many past paper questions, once you've written so many essays based on previous questions, and then looking at the mark scheme guidance, that really helps sort of learn the style of what examiners are looking for any subject.
Anyway, moving on. Did you consider doing an apprenticeship perhaps? And ultimately, why did you choose to pursue a higher education?
So I met a career counsellor in year 11.
And I did raise the potential of doing an apprenticeship just because it's another option as opposed to A-levels. But it was very quickly a case of, he said, look, you're very bright, you're very capable, your grades and your academic profile is that of somebody who can access the top universities. So, you're better suited to university education. And because I've always been academically minded and I've always enjoyed my studies, carrying on with the more traditional route of education after high school made sense to me anyways. And don't get me wrong, apprenticeships are fantastic. There are some great apprenticeships out there that are in specific instances much better than the degree option. for example, the big four accounting firms run very, very, very good apprenticeship schemes. And that's perhaps a better route into accounting as opposed to, doing a 3-year BSc in accounting and then doing your exams and whatnot. So, just because you gain a massive amount of experience at 18, which is not something many people do, and you don't need to take out you don't need to then have the sort of student finance or the expenses that uni brings with it. But going back to me, a degree, especially from an elite university such as LSE, is a passport. You can get into loads of industries, whereas perhaps with an apprenticeship, you might be tied down to a line of business. I hope I haven't come across as sounding arrogant, but I mean, education is always important to me. I pursued a traditional education to maximize my career options, because if you look at the degree I took, it's political science. Now, what route does that naturally lead into? Maybe becoming a political consultant or becoming an academic and pursuing political science as a master's and PhD and then as a researcher. But because I was at LSE, it opened so many more doors for me because, unless it's very technical roles, they're not hiring, based off your degree. They're hiring based on you. So, that traditional education, maximize my career options and then admittedly my income. And, there's nothing wrong with wanting to earn, a good living, and nothing wrong, with sort of that aspect of your development. I'm from a low socioeconomic background myself, and therefore, all things considered, the route that I took was probably the best way to improve my life. Looking now that I've graduated and I'm about to start work, looking back on my education, it's only now that I can truly appreciate just how many doors have been opened for me due to the route that I pursued. I can only now sort of see that having gone through those doors. And it's kind of like what Steve Jobs said, you only connect the dots looking backwards. So it's only with that hindsight that I can truly understand the importance of education. You won't have, not many people will have the foresight to sort of see how the dots connect. But once they've been through that journey, they'll start to appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for that. Anyway, what was your university application rationale? I.e., what was your thinking behind applying to the universities you did do, and which universities did you apply to?
So I applied to 4 unis, and not 5 because I couldn't really decide which to take the 5th spot. So I applied to Oxford, LSE, King's College, and Manchester. Walking through that rationale behind my decision, my goal was to either get into Oxford or, failing that, study in London. London is a global city, with everything on your doorstep, whether that's careers, just things to do, lifestyle, etc. And therefore it's some place that I've always wanted to live in. But if I had got into Oxford, I would have been able to stomach living in Oxford, which is sort of smaller and more town-like, simply because I would have been at the University of Oxford. But the thing is, I built my application around a pessimistic assumption that I actually wouldn't make it to Oxford. It's really hard to get into, and so, you need a good contingency plan. Hence, I applied to LSE. It's the best uni in the world for political science, and I felt that I was more likely to get into the LSE as opposed to Oxford. And it's one of the best for economics and also for careers like in banking and finance. It's actually, a lot better than potentially Oxford and Cambridge in terms of opening your doors. So I applied for there, and then that was like the top uni that I was targeting in London. As for King's, they offered a political economy undergraduate course, which is exactly what I wanted. But, King's isn't as reputable as LSE, but even though the grade requirements were the same, LSE wanted an A in maths, whereas King's just wanted 3 A's in any subjects. And as for Manchester, they wanted ABB for the politics and economics degree, and so Manchester was also my backup. It's also closer to home, and so I could have commuted as opposed to staying there, and then I would have saved a lot of money. In the end, I got offers from LSE, King's, and Manchester. I firmed LSE, and then Manchester was my backup. So in case I didn't get the A-level grades, I would have gone to Manchester.
So you've applied to 4 universities and you've got into the London School of Economics. Tell us about your time at the London School of Economics. What did you like/dislike about the LSE?
I would probably describe my relationship with LSE as like a love-hate one. I enjoyed the academic aspects of life at uni. The lectures were great, and the classes were great. Seminar discussions, fantastic, and the wide range of um, avenues I could explore as a political science undergrad, really let me firstly figure out what I was interested in, and then let me hone in on that throughout my 3 years. However, the student culture around career progressions at LSE is quite toxic because everybody, or a vast majority of students, are competitive for spring weeks, internships, and the other associated sort of career experiences that students are after. Even if you're doing very well, you can still end up feeling very anxious and insecure. And I think that student culture is definitely one of the things that LSE needs to improve upon, and definitely as a body of students is something that we need to work on. The social life of a LSE, it's really not that impressive. There aren't that many, well, for me personally, there aren't that many, northern Pakistani lads at the university, and so it can be quite alienating. At the start, it's definitely hard, struggling to fit in or find your circle. But luckily for me, um, I realized very early on that I need to have a good relationship with my academic mentor. My academic mentor did help me adjust. I'd go to her, I'd sort of speak to her about my experiences, and she'd give her insight because she's been an academic mentor for tons of students. And that definitely helped me feel more at home in London. My mentor was perhaps the main reason why I came out with the grades that I did. And there was always something to talk about with her, and she really helped me, So I decided to switch degrees because I dropped the economics, and she helped me manage that transition and the related university bureaucracy. I actually started doing government and economics, but in my second year at the start, when I looked through the syllabus for the economics courses, I realized that, like partial base derivative models and, Euler-Lagrange theorem and all that isn't what I want to be doing. It's an integral part of the economics course at LSE, but it's too mathematical for me. So that math side of economics is not something I was interested in. And therefore, when I was picking my modules, my mentor, I was able to bounce ideas off, based on what I've enjoyed and whatnot. And that's the one big advice I would give to any student at LSE, but also any other uni, adjusting for, different structures of academic mentoring. But, build a relationship with your academic mentor, as they'll be really helpful. The relationship with your mentor is one that you as a student are like free to mold. It isn't like a predetermined relationship. It's not like they're just there to help you manage the university bureaucracy. In my case, they did that. In my case, they were a pastoral figure as well. But, in some cases, I know students who've built a relationship with their academic mentor based solely around academic interests. They're both interested in the same topics, same areas of research. And so that's sort of what they have discussed about. And, that's sort of one thing that I would employ students to do.
Yeah, thanks for that. And to now transition away from education, do you have a job lined up? And if yes, what job is it and why this particular line of business?
So I was lucky enough to get a full-time job offer from JP Morgan in the wholesale payments team. Wholesale payments, it's kind of an umbrella term, but essentially it encompasses transaction banking. Other banks and other companies use different terms. It's not like investment banking where it's one singular term to describe a set of work and activities that's going on. Unfortunately, it's not as uniform with regards to name. And it's essentially managing liquidity for companies and payment infrastructure. In some cases, that's big companies or even in some cases countries. So to sort of make that a bit more real, you take the example of Starbucks. Starbucks has, thousands of shops across the world. You know, you're paying this, so they've got tons of, thousands, millions of dollars, euros, sterling, every other currency under the sun coming into them, and from thousands of locations. So what we're basically doing is we're doing like the plumbing for Starbucks. How do you get from the Starbucks branch in Blackburn to, I don't really know where they're based, but let's say their HQ's in New York. How do you get that, £3.50 that I've paid for my chai latte, to the New York office? And what do you do with the money once it's all centralized? And that's really what wholesale payments is doing. It's managing the infrastructure around your cash, when your employees are get paid, managing the multiple currency obligations, etc., certain regulatory influences. And then any spare cash you have, how are you deploying that? How are you making sure you're efficient with your money? So that's sort of a brief explanation. I hope that makes sense. Initially, I was, going many steps back, exposed to JP Morgan, the world of finance, through an organization called the Social Mobility Foundation, which gives students from high achieving students from low income backgrounds access to the top professions. So they didn't just have a banking and finance program, they had a law program, they had an accounting program, a medicine program, a journalism program. So I applied for the 2-week work experience with JP Morgan, even though I'd never heard of them and I never knew what sort of the world of finance is like. But so I was kind of going into this blind. But the initial 2-week experience was quite insightful and I really enjoyed it. And I got, as part of the program, you're given a mentor for a year, and they definitely help, your development, your understanding of the firm, your CV, applying to uni, next steps, how to develop yourself. So that was really useful. Following on from that, I went to, I got to uni and I did a spring break in my first year. They're like first year, 1 week, very short insight programs into the company that you're at. So I did mine in the markets line of business, markets being, sales, trading, research. And in the 2-week work experience I did a week in the private bank, which is dealing with high net worth individuals. And that's also through the Social Mobility Foundation when I got my first exposure to wholesale payments. So, I had basically insight into 3 lines of business, which helped me, decide which one was for me. I really enjoyed the wholesale payments division. So that's where I applied. That's what my first preference was for summer internships. And the summer internships are basically like the main pipeline where a lot of these companies recruit onto their full-time positions. It's 10 weeks where you're on the desk, you're actually doing work, you're part of a team. And that's where you get to know if this is for you. So you get to know if this role is for you, and they get to know if you're the right fit. So it's a 2-way process. The spring weeks and everything up until that point are just insights. You're not actually doing any work. You're just good at getting more insight and more information. But this is prolonged exposure. And the internship is really, you're getting a feel of the life, the culture, the team, the work, everything. And then therefore that's the best way you can really assess whether this is the job for you. And, being honest, for me, that internship was probably the best 10 weeks of my life. I really, really, really enjoyed it. The professionalism, the work, the routine, just all of it, And I was like, if I'm lucky enough to get a full-time offer, I know these things are competitive, but if I'm lucky enough to get it, I will 100% accept it. And that's precisely what happened. When you're deciding what you want to do, you need to be completely comfortable with the people you work with, especially in finance. The working week's slightly longer, therefore you're going to be spending more time with your colleagues. And it really is a collegiate, collaborative culture. So you're not just going to be spending time with the person sat next to you because they sit next to you. You're going to be working with that person. You're going to need to be bouncing off ideas, discussing, issues relating to clients, etc. And so you really need to have it, make sure that probably the single most important factor in deciding whether it's a good fit for you is, do you get on with the people? And I really enjoyed the people, so hence why I really enjoyed the internship. With regards to other divisions, like I mentioned investment banking, markets, those lines of business are much more intense with longer working hours. I really appreciate my free time. I like to do other things in my free time. Like I like to do running. I like to socialize with my friends and see family and things like that. So I think, those for me are things I'm not willing to compromise on. And so hence why I needed a role that would accommodate a much healthier work-life balance. So hence why I opted for this role, because genuinely I'd ask that to people on the desks, what is your work-life balance like? And I could see that for myself, what time people were leaving, what people were getting up to. And so, you can make that judgment call in for yourself. So, that's sort of why I opted for this division as part of my rationale.
What does a day in the life of a wholesale payments analyst consist of?
Day in the life of a wholesale payments analyst. So I think I'm going to caveat my answer first by saying that days in general, corporate life, especially in banking, is massively different day to day. No 2 days are the same. But having said that, as an analyst, because you're on a structured program, there is a bit more structure to your day. So people get in anywhere between 8 and 9 p.m. And then they start. For me, I get in earlier because I like to have an hour or half an hour just when I get to my desk to check my emails, take stock of everything that's happened overnight, because that's when Asia have been operating. It's past office hours, and it's a truly global business, so you do need to take stock of those things. I like to read the news, see any developments, anything I need to be aware of for the next day, check my emails, I check my calendar, then I formulate a list. So I have a notebook and I formulate a list. This is everything I need to do today. This can be some of it. The way I structure my list is, firstly I write down all the things I can't get out of. If I've got a meeting with my manager at 9 o'clock, I will write 9 a.m. meeting with manager. If I've got a meeting with regards to something at 12, I will write meeting with person about this. And then I look through all my essential tasks and I think, okay, so I've got a meeting with my manager at 9. I need to prepare for that. So I need to then prepare for meeting with manager, and I'll need to sort of think about what actually do I need to do to prepare, whether that's preparing material, am I presenting something to him, etc. If I've got a meeting about X, I need to actually sort of think, okay, what am I going into this meeting sort of about? And then if I have any free time, I look at the tasks that I need to do. I look at any upcoming deadlines I have, which might be submitting material for a client, right? So I'm preparing the PowerPoint. So I need to actually do the PowerPoint and make sure. And surprisingly, this takes a lot of time, because you need to get it perfect. You need to get the wording perfect. You need to get the formatting perfect. You need to get the presentation perfect. So, your day is kind of like, the way you structure your day is you start with all the essential tasks, right? And the times around them, and you build the rest of your work around them. You don't ever have it isn't structured to a T. So that's sort of something that, any incoming analyst needs to be aware of, especially in wholesale payments. But when you join the wholesale payments team, you join as a rotational analyst. So you do 6 months on a desk and then you move on to a next one. And certain desks have decided that there are certain tasks that the rotational analyst will do. That's their job. So you sort of have what we call business as usual, BAU tasks, which might be, filling in the Excel spreadsheet for this month with regards to, interest rate spreads. And you've got to do that every month when the Fed and the Bank of England have their meeting with regards to base rates. And you've got to fill in the spread and see how that affects our client positions. And you've got to do that every month. That's your business as usual task. You've got a deadline to submit it by, and you've got it. Then this is the great thing. You've got full autonomy as to when you do it, just as long as you get it done and you get it done well. That's the best thing. It might be other things, typing up meetings for minutes, facilitating dialogue between a couple of teams. So there isn't really a sort of diary calendar style structure. You have tasks that you need to be done. You have deadlines and you just need to meet them, right? And then, people roughly leave anywhere between 5 and 6:30. depending on your day. If I had a relatively quiet day, I didn't have any upcoming deadlines, I did all my work, I'd leave closer to 5, maybe 5:15, 5:30, and I'd go home or whatever. Or if I was going to see friends afterwards, I'd make sure I'd leave so I could see my friends at the time I agreed, and people would understand. But let's say tomorrow I've got a big pitch and I've got a PowerPoint to deliver, then I'd stay and make sure my work's done, and I'd probably leave a bit later. And that's sort of how it goes. Some days are varied, some days are not. I had to wake up around like 5:45, 5:30, just because I don't like to be rushed in the morning. And so I'd wake up, I'd have my coffee and my breakfast and whatnot, and then I'd get changed, and I like to do that at a leisurely pace. I don't like being rushed. And then I sort of walk to the tube station, I get the tube, which takes me an hour, hence why I have to wake up so early. So I get in for about 8. And then after work, it depends on if I finish early and I have time, I'll go for a run, I'll eat, relax a bit, and then go to bed, or I'll see friends. I try to play football on a Friday night. I think one of the great things about Wholesale Payments is that the team tries to have like 5 o'clock finish on a Friday, like strictly. And one thing that I think sort of is not mentioned enough is, even, I mentioned as an intern, you need to network. It's the same as an analyst. It's the same even when you're like a VP or a director or whatever. You need to be networking constantly, because networking is essentially relationship building, right? You need to have and it's great. The more people you have a good relationship, the better that is. Because if you come across a task that you're struggling to do, somebody in a team that can help you, just ping them a message like, hey, I've got this task, can you help me? And they'll point you in the right direction. And so that's sort of one thing that, is definitely, something that needs to be incorporated. But essentially you have relative autonomy to do your job, and just as long as you meet your tasks.
So what skills are needed to succeed in the wholesale payments division?
So skills needed for wholesale payments, I think the great thing about this division is that you can teach a person from any degree background to how to do their job. JP Morgan is great at training people. However, there are a few basic skills that, you need. You need to be able to work in a team. You need to be good at managing your time. Like I said, you have tons and tons and tons of deadlines. And you need to, and like, you'll have like 5 tasks going on at once, all with different deadlines, all to different people maybe, and you just need to be able to manage your time effectively. But, some things that will make your life a lot easier is knowing how to use Excel, knowing how to use PowerPoint, being good with a computer. They're just basic fundamental skills that will be great. But there isn't really, like, the threshold is quite, not, I wouldn't say low, but it's, you don't need as much technical skills as compared to maybe IBD or markets.
Yeah, thanks for that. So what tips could you give to interns in general?
So in order to do well on an internship, and as I mentioned before, this is all a people's business. You just have to get on with your team. So that's the fundamental part of it. There are going to be the people that are going to go out to bat for you when the decision is being made whether you get a job. So if you haven't got on well with your team, then the people who are there to defend you and say, actually, this person should get a job, they aren't even going to do that. So you don't even stand a chance. And the way you get on with your team is to just be yourself. Like, these people come from all walks of life, all different backgrounds. And so they're used to dealing with different people. What I would say is that, so they're used to this, so they can handle a different personality, but don't be something you're not, because that inauthenticity will come out. So that's sort of the foundation of it. To build on top of that, you need to network effectively. So you need to actually think, okay, what's my approach going to be to networking? Because you need to strike the right balance between making sure that enough people are aware of you across the business, and also that you're not seeing like you're networking, going for coffees every single hour of every single day, that you actually are doing work and putting work in. So it's a balance of both. And for me, the way I did it was that within wholesale payments, there's a lot of different things going on. Instead of saying, who should I network with? I asked myself, what do I need to know? to understand this business, and who's going to teach that to me best. And so essentially, I would ask managers of other little bits within wholesale payments, just for a coffee, explain what they do. So once I got to know my team, I spent the first few weeks getting to know my team. Then I thought, okay, I know my team very well. I have a good relationship with most of them. Let's go on to the next bit, which is learning about the rest of the business and then piecing it all together. But then also, because I wasn't like just trying to be like, okay, network, I was like being more strategic about it. I also gave the impression that I wasn't going all the time. And when I did go, it was for a reason. And I think finally, just being competent, like when you're given a task, like do it well. Like, for example, if somebody asks you to put together a PowerPoint for something, you need to actually like do it properly, and like just basic things like no typos, making sure that everything's correct, and being of value. So I think within my company, they always talk about adding value and being like useful. So that's basically things like, if somebody puts out an email saying, oh, I need somebody to do this for me, like offering to do it if you can do it, asking, making sure, like if you're sat at your desk doing nothing, like putting it around that you like have capacity to like help out with something. And those things, go are heard well. One thing I did was, like, a specific example that I'm going to give is, so we have like I was in a product management role, which basically means that we're experts of our product that we're selling, but we had teams that would sell our product. Now, for them, there's a lot of technical stuff that they weren't really aware of, and they had to keep asking the product management team, okay, does this work? Does this work? Can we do this? So essentially, I created like a bunch of like documents that they could just look at, like quick cheat sheets, and they could then reference them instead of having to ring up our desk and ask us all the time. And so it was just little things like that. That's going to make their job so much easier now, because they don't have to ring somebody or email them and wait for a reply. They can go on the SharePoint, look at the document, and then access the information easily. So little things like that, making processes easier, being of service to people, things like that, they'll make you stand out. But yeah, like I said, at a fundamental level, I got on well with my team. I networked effectively, so my name was out there, and I tried to add value where I could. And I think those three generally will get you on a return offer.
Yeah, Adnan, thanks for this. Thanks for this whole interview. I really appreciate it. Finally, just before I let you go, could you tell us of a quote somebody once said to you that you've remembered, a quote that perhaps has changed your life or the way you view life?
This is quite a difficult question. A quote that someone said that stuck with me. So I'm going to go with a quote that I actually got from my internship last year. We had like the interns got to sit down with like senior directors from the company. So I was sat with one of the directors, and she was describing her career, and I said I asked her, I said your career it's not been very linear. It's sort of gone, in very unexpected directions. And I sort of said, did you plan for that? How did you plan for that? And she said to me, she goes, look, Adnan, you don't plan for these things. She goes, all right, you can have a 10-year plan, a 20-year plan, a 5-year plan. It's never going to happen. It's never going to follow that plan, because beyond a certain threshold of time, you just can't control things. So she was like, plan for 2 to 3 years. You can control things within your 2 to 3 years, right? And I was like, for me, that just really hit home, because I'm the type of person who wants to have a 10-year plan, who'd love to know what I'm having for dinner in 10 years' time, right? That's the type of person I am. So to just hear that from somebody very senior who I knew had become very successful was very interesting and changed the way I think about things. So now I've kind of dropped the whole 5-year plan, 10-year plan. For me, my focus is the next 2 to 3 years and having tangible goals, so that at the end of those 3 years, I could just review and be like, okay, this is where I'm at. This is where I want it to be. Doesn't match up. Okay, what's next? So that's something that really stuck with me, and a piece of advice that I've and a quote that I've actually genuinely implemented into my life.
Yeah, thanks for that, Adnan. And that pretty much brings us to a close. Now, after recording the podcast with Adnan, he sent me a text message saying that one piece of advice he would give to people applying for internships is to apply early. So he said a lot of these investment banks tend to recruit on a rolling basis, and so it's pretty much a case of first come, first serve. If you've got a really stellar application, but you're submitting that application towards the end of the duration that, for which the internship is open, you're less likely to get in than if you were to put that application in at the beginning of the allotted time that banks tend to give for their internship applications. So yeah, definitely apply early. And to all of our listeners, thanks for listening. I hope you guys have enjoyed this first episode in our career series. Look forward to the next one, because in the next episode we're going to have an investment banker at a leading investment bank talking about his experiences and whatnot. And yeah, that's one you guys should defo check out if you're interested. So take care, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.